Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural event that we've all been waiting for. Playing to Win Practitioners Insight. My name is Tiffany Bova, and I'm thrilled to be able to have a brand new show with my dear friend, Roger Martin, who is just infamous. He wrote an amazing book called Playing to Win, which is really the foundation of this conversation. Think Scott Galloway, Kara Swisher, but you could pick who's who.
Nice,
Nice,
nice.
right?
It's great to be with you, Tiffany. And as I've said before, I like making excuses to do things with people I really like, and this is a great excuse. And you came up with the idea, which I think is a great idea. I'm an ideas guy, and so when I hear a great idea, I like it. And I thought this would be a great way to go into greater depth and have interesting conversations about some of these written pieces.
So if you don't know, Roger writes something every Monday, Playing to Win, and he's got over 200 of them. He puts them out on Medium. He's one of the top 5 producers on Medium, really, for readership. But his videos have 5 million views and a million view. I mean, his opinions around strategy, in my mind, are up there with sort of the Peter Druckers of the world. Or even the Clayton Christensen's, which, by the way, were very dear friends of Rogers. So in great company. And, a little small side story, when I asked Roger to endorse my last book and he read the opening, he's like, if you don't correct this, I won't endorse it. And it was a Drucker quote that was falsely attributed and more clarity was needed. So, he is sort of—
I'm a stickler.
he is a stickler, but it made it better, right?
Yeah.
I just said, I'm just going to copy exactly what you wrote, Roger, and I'll give you credit.
Oh, no, that's nice.
So we're just going to dig in. At the end of the day, I think strategy is a word like innovation, like leadership. It is used often and not always generally agreed upon on the definition. And I think, as people sit in a room and go, we need a strategy. I'm a first-time leader. I'm a small business, a medium business, an enterprise. Like, we need a strategy. And someone goes, okay, and they bring their own bias of what that means. And then what it means to them. I think we should ground in your definition so that people can go, okay, agree, disagree, and then we can talk about that. Start there.
Sure. So my definition of strategy is that it's an integrated set of choices that compels desired customer action. And I guess there's a few key pieces of it. One is integrated. So it's a bunch of choices that have to fit together and reinforce each other. If it's just sort of a laundry list of choices, that doesn't count, even though people could say, well, those are choices, Roger. You said it's choices. No, they have to fit together and reinforce each other in a way that compels customer action. And why is there the need to compel customer action? Well, it's one thing in business you just don't control. Like, you control how much you spend, how many factories you build, how many employees you hire, what you pay them, how much you advertise. There's a huge list of things that as a business you have total control over. Like, nobody can stop you from doing them. But boy, there's one tricky thing that you don't, right? And that's what customers do. I mean, you can't make them buy your stuff. You may wish you could, but you can't. And so the real art of strategy is figuring out, if we made this set of choices to do these things, not some other things, these things, it would cause customers to take the action that we desire, the desired customer action. And that's, to me, strategy.
Yeah, and you said, it may be what you want, or you might want that to happen. But of course, the great quote, "Hope is not a strategy." That would sort of land right
That's
there.
AG.
Right?
AG always said that. Yeah, AG definitely.
Yep. So the hope is not a strategy. Where I think, you work with some of the, most influential CEOs running some of the largest organizations in this world. And would you say that there is a general agreement on that when they say, hey, Roger, like, I'm going to hire you, right? Bring you in. I'm trying to do this or that in the organization. Do you start with the sort of grounding of, let's make sure we understand what we're building from? And do you feel like there is this general consensus around strategy, or do you feel that it is so misunderstood that it may actually be doing disservice to those leaders?
Yeah, it's more the latter. So no, there isn't a consensus on it. I would say mine is a minority view. Maybe because I've written so much about it and whatever, it's a consequential view, but it is not the majority view. The majority view of strategy is you get your management team together and at an offsite, and you ask each person kind of what are important initiatives for them. Manufacturing, what's important for you? Tiffany, your marketing, what's important for you? And you make a list of the things that are important to all of those people, and then the CFO says, no, you can't do all of that, but we'll do half of it or whatever, and you come out of it with a list of initiatives that you're going to do. That would be 80% definition of strategy if you take the definition market share by actual usage, right? That's what most companies do. And so your question of like, well, what do I do with companies when I get involved with them? What I try to help them understand is that when they've done that before, right, they've produced gaps between what they wish were happening, right, the desired customer action, and what actually happens. Now they won't often describe it in those terms. They'll say, well, our market share is going down, or our margins are being squeezed, or whatever. But I take them back and say, well, you have made a set of choices that you wished would produce the following, but they don't seem to have. Why don't we ask ourselves, how could we make choices differently to make the gap between what we wish were happening and what is happening go away? And so rather than getting into a lot of intricacies about strategy, I just say, you're unhappy, the choices aren't producing what you wish. Let's embark on a journey of making better choices. And as we get on that, I'll tell them more and more about, like, this is why this relates to this. Yes, you want to build a big factory, but if we don't have a compelling value proposition for what we build, it doesn't matter that the costs of it are going to be low because we've got a giant scale factory. It doesn't link with that other choice. Our CMO Tiffany kind of understands some things about customers, and what you want to do in manufacturing. I can barely see any link between those two things. How could we link these two things to make those choices more integrative? That's the sort of way I try to get them going from a random list of stuff to an integrated set of choices.
Well, and if you remember, it was many years ago when I was writing Growth IQ, and I was talking to you about this concept that I uncovered in that work around sequence.
Yes.
Right. And what you just said is it build the manufacturing plant, the decision, before you have the value prop. The sequence in which you do things in that decision tree has meaningful implications to your ability to be successful.
I agree.
It is you do need to do the manufacturing plant, and you need to do the value proposition. Right. And maybe it's based on that. It would be simultaneous work streams. I'm doing value prop. Someone's doing, the warehouse or manufacturing, but we're working towards this common goal where we will reintegrate, right, when they're done.
Yep.
But what happens usually that I see is that one is racing, the other one's going really slowly. Yeah. And either the one is waiting, or it looks back and says, I'm not going to wait, I'm going anyway. And then you find yourself right in this world of hurt because you've got productivity low, right? Production's low because there's no demand, because there was no demand because the value prop wasn't finished, or vice versa. Fair?
Yes. No, I think so. Though I think it's like the two things. The two things are your sequencing problem, absolutely. But then also, do they actually fit? Like, is the factory designed, right, to carry out the value proposition we want? How many times you work with lots of organizations? How many times have you found a situation where manufacturing, which may be digital, like it may be the engineering, coding, whatever, they say, oh, well, we've set up the structure of this software. It can't do that, Tiffany. and you sort of like, well, then this value proposition ain't ever going to see the light of day because our engineers can't do it, or our factory can't
Right.
manufacture a physical product. So I think thinking about those two things, right? Sequence when, as you talked about in growth IQ, and then the fit and reinforcement. Do all of these choices fit with one another and reinforce one another? We've picked this value proposition because we have an inherent advantage in bringing that to market because we've got the right distribution channel for it. Well, those two things then reinforce each other. They don't just fit. Each choice makes the other better, right? That the best strategies have an enormous amount of reinforcement in them, where the various choices kind of reinforce each other.
And create that flywheel, right? I mean, at the end of the day, one begets the next, begets the next, begets the next, right? And I think through your work, as I mentioned very quickly at the beginning, it's over 200 pieces of content. But through that, at the beginning of this year, 2025, you really looked at the content, saw what people were writing, the comments, and came up with this sort of thematic deep dive of 5 areas within this topic. So while we just started with what does strategy mean and trying to come together on some, starting point, which we will debate again and again and again. But, in this case, like, let's just quickly go through the 5. And for those of you listening, know that the shows will continue. We will have a lot more content, and we're going to have a show per of the 5 and continue down this line and read the comments and read the feedback on Roger's Medium post and as well as on mine, and just really try to understand where can we add the most value around this playing to win, right? That's the goal. We're not in business to lose. We want to win. So maybe you can start with outlining the 5.
Sure. So the first category is the strategy choice cascade, which arguably the little conversation we had, if I wrote a piece on our conversation, that would be in that first category, because and we'll talk about it more in this, but the playing to win, I have a model of the 5 key choices. When I say it's an integrated set of choices, well, it's this 5 choices. So there's a bunch of articles that go into either how that functions as a whole, all 5, or about an individual box. The first box is winning aspiration. I did a piece on, well, what should go into that box. The last box is enabling management system. I did a piece on that. So that's one category. So what are the choices? The second category is a category that I think of as, well, if you buy that, if you say, yep, I think those choices make sense, Roger, how do you do it, right? By what process do you go through so that you make those 5 choices? And I have a process I call the strategic choice structuring process that has a number of steps. And so I've written a whole lot of articles on how you do that, because in lots of the reader comments, they want to know, well, that sounds good, Roger, but I'm sitting here in my organization. I don't have one of those right now. I want one. How do I get it? So there's a bunch of articles on that. Then when I looked at the articles, the 208 of them in the 52 times 4 articles, I noticed that some weren't either about the boxes themselves or the process, but were rather principles I use when I do a strategy. And so articles like, I did one on what makes for a great strategist, right? Like, what sort of mindset, where does your head have to be? How do you have to behave to be a great strategist? That's sort of principles that apply to creating strategy. And then I get asked a lot of questions. 4th category, I get asked lots of questions about, how does playing to win relate to this? Sometimes it's, how does playing to win relate to this book? How does it relate to Clay's Jobs to be Done? How does it relate to Rummelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, Blue Ocean Strategy? Or how does it relate to this other thing, strategy versus planning? We talked a little bit about that up front. That would be in that. Here's how you should think about strategy versus planning, or strategy. Lately, people, how do I think about AI in the context of strategy? So that's the fourth category. And the fifth category is, you see, this is sort of taking me out of my comfort zone. I'm not into this, but they're essentially frontal assaults on something that I think is really dumb, right? So examples of that would be I had a piece on how SWOT is useless. Don't ever do SWOT. So if you're listening and you never do another SWOT again, you've made your life better. OKRs, the misuse of OKRs. One that was super popular, but if you're too busy, that's not a laudatory thing. It means your personal strategy sucks. Those would be frontal assaults on what people believe now. That I say, if you believe that, if you continue to believe that, it'll make you less good at strategy. So here's another way to think about it. So those are the five, and it was just fun to categorize. In some sense, the series is fairly organic. I will just be thinking about something. A client that I'm working with will bring something up. Somebody will send me a note, and I just do them. And it was fun for me to go back and say, of all the things you've done, do they kind of fit into some buckets? And they did fit into these 5 buckets.
Well, that was a great 5, and I can't wait to dig in. And we're not going to do it today. We will do it. But as we sort of wrap up our inaugural show, just to sort of tease out what we're going to be talking about, your history of the Dean of Rotman. I mean, you number 1 Thinker 50. I was number 50 the first year I made it on. Thank God I wasn't 51. There's only way to go was up.
Yeah.
Only way to go is up. And Roger, by the way, was the one who nominated me to be on that list. So I'm forever grateful. Forever grateful. But if you just put your Dean of Rotman hat back on at the moment, right? And the MBA question, which you and I always talk about when I have you on my show, because the MBA is business. And if someone is listening to this and it's like, look, I have my MBA, I got this, right? Or I know what he's talking about.
Yes.
If either they have their MBA or they don't, the individual, what do you think they can do beyond reading your work, obviously, but to really hone in on this skill, right? Because it might be, look, I'm a middle manager and I'm aspiring to be, right? Or I'm thinking of starting my own business, or, it could be a myriad of things. But going back to your Rotman days, and you're standing in front of your class and you're talking to them about this to get them excited about this particular topic and why it matters, what would you say to them today?
I would say you'd be better off if you forgot / ignored everything you learned in strategy in business school.
Oh, that might be the quote of the show.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but it's gone off in a direction that isn't very helpful. And that's one of the reasons why I've written about this too. And then the series strategy is becoming a lost art. So I literally, if they were sitting here, I'd say, what you learned in strategy in your business school was a bunch of analytical techniques. That is not strategy. Sorry. It would be nice if it were, but it isn't. And you should read Playing to Win and these 208 pieces, and you will have a much better idea of how to do strategy. But if you keep in your head all that stuff that you learned at business school, it'll be confusing to you, because this is a picture that is not taught at business school. And I did not teach this at the Rotman School. And you know why, Tiffany? Any guesses why?
Oh, I don't know if I want to open that can of worms, but probably because that's just not the sort of the track of what they wanted you to cover.
Yeah, there's an acceptable set of things that are taught in the modern business school. If you're top-notch, say a top 50 US business school, there's a theory that you're supposed to teach. If you deviate from that, you are not allowed. So I was not allowed, even though I was dean, because the departments, they control the content in their department. And so even though I was the all-powerful, notionally dean, they could decide what was taught, and I was never allowed to teach this material. I did it because the students just loved this stuff, and they loved the fact that I had a practitioner background. I did it co-curricularly. So I did it on Saturdays. I just said, I'm going to teach, I'm going to give a seminar, and I did it for alums. I invited alums back. If you want to come, just come.
Yeah.
But you couldn't get it for credit. So the for credit part of what students learn in strategy isn't helpful.
Well, I'm going to end this first part on that, right? If that wasn't like a mic drop, like, sorry, you're in debt, $250,000 or whatever it is, but right. You just need to read Playing to Win. Oh, and Growth IQ, and read
Yes.
the 200 articles. But with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Roger, for this first run. I can't wait for our next conversation. Make sure you all keep up with his posts, my posts, to see when we're going to be launching the next show. Leave comments so that we can know what you want to talk about next time. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Tiffany.